Christmas in the Country. When I was a little girl, I lived with my grandparents in the country. Our house was small and white. It had an old coal stove to keep us warm and a tiny little kitchen for supper and a nice back porch for the dogs. In the summer, I sat in our swing and I ate fresh tomatoes and sang. And in fall, I helped can apples. And in spring, I took long walks with my granny. And in winter, I waited for Christmas. Winter in the country is so quiet. The snow slows everything down. Birds are silent and serious. Dogs stay in their warm houses and children just want cocoa and blankets. Everyone is ready for something really special. Everyone's ready for Christmas. My grandfather always got our Christmas tree from the woods behind the house. Off he'd go with his axe while my grandmother and I pulled boxes of old ornaments from her closet, which smelled like wool and mothballs. I loved those ornaments. Some of them I had made myself. Hard foam bells glued with green glitter, red construction paper chains. There were silver icicles and white glass stars and soft angels. Each ornament reminded me of my whole life. Grandfather always brought home a tree that was a little too wide or a little too tall, and we would have to spend the next few weeks squeezing around it in the living room. It seemed sometimes like an embarrassed guest, but we loved that tree and couldn't wait to turn on the lights at night. It was the prettiest thing that we had. On Christmas Eve, my grandparents and I went to service at the small Baptist church at the bottom of the hill. I got to stand up with the children and sing a Christmas carol for the grown-ups. Afterward, each child was given a small brown bag full of candy and nuts and a tangerine. I gave my grandfather the tangerine because he loved them. My grandparents and I walked home from church through the snow and into our warm little kitchen. We pulled off our wet boots and gloves and hung them near the stove to dry, and then my grandmother helped me write a note to Santa Claus while my grandfather rested. I left Santa a saucer of cookies and a glass of milk and the nicest note that I could think of. And then I went to bed. And in the morning when I woke, it was still a little dark outside and still a little shivery, and I went to my grandparents' bed and I asked them to help me see what Santa brought, and they rose up from their warm quilts together. We all went to the tree. Every Christmas, Santa gave me just what I wanted, a new doll, and he always gave me something else that I hadn't asked for. It was a surprise, a paint-by-number kit, a bear bank, a coloring book. His cookies were always gone and his milk glass was always empty, and I was glad that Santa liked everything. I went to church again with my grandparents later that Christmas morning. They let me take my doll. The service was short because the preacher knew everyone wanted to play with their toys and to have bake their hams. He just reminded us what Christmas was about and then sent us home. And all that day, there were aunts and uncles and cousins knocking at the door, and neighbors dropping off pies, and dogs barking at all the commotion and waiting for leftovers. My grandparents and I kept our Christmas tree for as long as we could, and then finally, after the new year, it was time to take it down. Grandfather hauled it into the woods, while my grandmother and I put the ornaments away. We swept up the needles and the tinsel, and then we all had milk and biscuits. Christmas in the country was over. There were spring walks and summer tomatoes and fall apples to look forward to now. But in that closet of wool and mothballs, there would be boxes of old ornaments waiting.